what's up? This is Logan Mize, and you are listening to TNCRadio.live.
Welcome. Good evening. I'm Tom Kelly here with Dr. Christopher Cortman, and this is Building Strong Minds.
Hello, everybody.
Great to have you all with us. Dr. Cortman is located in the thriving metropolis of Venice, Florida, the oldest city in the United States, and not because of the age, Dr. Cortman. Not because of the age of the people there. It turns out that they have evidence that an Indian tribe known as the Paleo Indians there's evidence that they existed in that area going back to 8200 BC, 8200 BC.
Yeah, most of the residents in Venice remember that.
And I was going to say, and some of them are still your patients, aren't they? No.
82 BC is what most of the Venice residents call middle age.
8200, yeah. 8,200 BC. Awfully happy to have you all with us. Dr. Cortman has facilitated more than 75,000 hours of psychotherapy in his private practice. He works with a great team right now who help those in southwestern Florida with all sorts of issues, concerns, and staying healthy and needing to be healthier and all that kind of stuff. And that's part of what we want to talk about tonight is how do you stay healthy in this chaotic world? It's tough right now. Dr. Cortman, I know that you advise against being a media junkie because it can be tough to put all that stuff in your brain. But, here we are. This is our, sixth or seventh show, something like that. And you think about all the things that have gone on just since the first of the year. The Omicron virus, that was a big deal. And then we had the Super Bowl, and that's always exciting. And, all sorts of really horrible weather that we've had to deal with throughout the U.S. And now the world is at war, or at least on the brink of war, and it's hard to turn all this stuff off. So I'm going to start off with kind of maybe a softball question for you, Dr. Chris. Do you believe that watching all this stuff on TV, because it's hard not to, what's going on? What's happening? I want to know what's happening. Or, what's happening? Do you believe that kind of stress, even though we're not in Ukraine, we're not in the middle of the war, but can that kind of stress impact our health here in the U.S.?
Well, it's a great question. Not only does watching that, especially on television or in any kind of visual manner, not only does that impact people all over the world, it has the power to be very upsetting. And it's, you're not going to be surprised by this, but it's designed to be. The news media is sponsored by corporate America. And they have one mission, and that mission is to keep you watching. Because when you watch, you will buy the products that are being advertised. So the most important thing is to make sure you keep watching. Now, there's two emotions that we know that titillates the nervous system, that makes us inclined to be aroused, if you will. One of those is fear, terror, anything that pushes the button that frightens us. We are inclined to watch when we're afraid. We want more information. And so they will deliberately replay the most horrific things they can, and over and over and over again, as you remember from 9/11. We saw those same scenes again and again that push that panic button and compel you to keep watching. And the other emotion that's linked with arousal and the need to keep watching is anger and rage. And so, there are a lot of people, again, going back to Venice and picking on the age group. We have a lot of older folks who will line up on one side or the other and watch 3 or 4 hours of whatever their brand is, and they'll emerge enraged, so angry with those bleeping liberals or those blind GOP people or whoever the other side is, they'll be enraged with them. And that means whoever they're watching has done an excellent job of manipulating them because they keep watching and they're going to buy those products and so forth. So one of the things I would want people to understand right at the beginning is that this is it's a competition for your mind and ultimately your money. So you need to be in charge of whatever is yours. And I tell people there's 3 things that we can control. If you hang out with me, you'll hear this a lot. And that is what you think, what you say, and what you do. And everything else in the world is not yours to control. So what can you do and what can you think? And one of the things I would want people to control is the amount of exposure that you have to the media. And it doesn't have to be visual, especially if you find that disturbing. You can do it in print. You can read from trusted sources, and you can get your news in a matter of 10 or 15 minutes a day, even online. It used to be you buy 2 or 3 newspapers. People don't buy newspapers anymore. They get their news online. But you can control, and this is the point, control the amount of exposure, just like you would control the temperature in your house, or you would control the volume on what you're listening to. You can control the amount of food you're taking in or alcohol. You want to control what's being pumped into your head.
I guess this is even more true when you realize that some states, Russia being one of them, actually put out false information to get people to believe one thing or another.
That would not be the first time in the history of mankind that a government was deliberately manipulating their people to their advantage, meaning the government's advantage.
Right. Well, I thought it was interesting tonight, Dr. Chris. So I did watch the news a little while ago, and they were talking about that the Russians were indiscriminately bombing a particular town. And then they went on to say that in this one particular town, several children were reportedly killed, including, and then they showed a picture of this fresh-faced young girl, 4th grader, blah, 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 whatever her name is. And I thought, now that is just downright manipulation. I have no doubt. I'll go so far as to say that it's true. Mm-hmm. But of the hundreds of people who were killed today in skirmishes all around that country, the one picture that they showed of a victim was a 4th grade little girl. Mm-hmm.
And there's
of her. Well, it wasn't her dead body or something, but just showing her. And I'm thinking, wow, that is manipulation, isn't it?
Yeah, it's designed to provoke that rage and the horror, because again, you'll watch, and also it can motivate people not only to keep watching, but with that kind of rage to do what people do when they feel that kind of rage, which could be retaliation, or it could be, the rest of the world, as we get upset by what we're watching, then we come down harder on Russia.
Interesting. Is this, well, I've got a related question, but I don't have time to ask it between now and the break. So when we come back, I'm going to ask you about the relationship between this and a certain genre of movies. So we'll talk about that when we come back here in just a few minutes. You're listening to TNC Radio.live. I'm Tom Kelly along with Dr. Christopher Cortman. The show is Building Strong Minds. This is for everybody. Everybody's invited in, and we welcome your opinion. So feel free to write to us here. You can write to us at Dr. Chris at tncradio.live. And we promise not to use your name or likeness or information on the air, but we would love to have your input. So again, this is tncradio.live. Stay tuned.
This blog is brought to you by the Truckers Network at app.thetruckersnetwork.net. The dark side of the long-haul trucker lifestyle. A trucker's lifestyle can be a gloomy place at times. The long days, stressful work environments, and loneliness have major effects on a driver's life. The dark side of the long-haul trucker's lifestyle is often overlooked and not addressed. As a result, many drivers suffer from mental and physical health problems. Before entering the trucking industry, long-haul truck drivers need to be aware of the good and bad that comes with this lifestyle. It's difficult to stay healthy. Being in good health is a rare thing for long-haul truck drivers. Life on the road doesn't give drivers many opportunities to live a healthy lifestyle. When you spend the majority of your trucking career on the go, your food options are limited. Although taking an exit to get McDonald's may seem like an easy solution or the easiest option, eating fast food for every meal for weeks at a time can cause serious health issues. Obesity is one of the most common health issues in truckers. If you don't watch your diet and exercise, you could end up developing a serious health problem. Say goodbye to a regular sleep schedule. The trucking industry runs 24/7, 365, so having a regular sleep schedule is rare for long-haul drivers. The loading and unloading times are often never the same. At times, a driver will deliver a load at 2 a.m. one day and 1 p.m. the next day. In addition to the inconsistent load times, drivers can make multiple deliveries a day. This creates a lot of stress on the body and leaves the driver operating on a few hours of sleep. If you're struggling with getting enough sleep and staying awake on the road, check out our blog, 5 Easy Steps to Help Truckers Stay Awake While Driving. You'll feel lonely. It's not uncommon for long-haul truck drivers to feel lonely while on the road. Drivers have very little face-to-face interactions while working on the road. While this may seem like a good thing for some drivers, it can start to develop depressive symptoms. Depression is a common side effect of trucking. To help avoid feeling depressed on the road, talk to your friends and family on the phone at least once a day. As a long-haul truck driver, you can often feel like you're missing out on your loved one's life. Communicating with them daily will help you feel less lonely. It's hard on your relationships. Long-haul trucking can strain your relationship with your significant other. Being away from your loved one for weeks at a time is never easy. In addition to being apart, many drivers struggle with balancing their work life and personal life. Relationships already take a lot of work, but long-distance relationships take even more work. When you become a long-haul truck driver, it's important to be willing to put an extra effort into your relationship. Some quick tips to having a healthy relationship as a long-haul truck driver. Communicate daily. Spend as much time together as possible when you're not working. Consider therapy. Avoid arguments. Trust each other. This blog has been brought to you by the Truckers Network at app.thetruckersnetwork.net. I'm Ron Samuels. We put it in reverse gear so you can enjoy the history of popular music and hear the soundtrack of life Wednesdays at 8 Eastern and 7 Central, right after the train station on tncradio.live.
Welcome back, tncradio.live. You can't help but to snap along with that, can you? It's just, it's the same music. And so, Dr. Chris, we were talking offline there a little bit. And so, here's my thing. I personally am not a big horror movie fan. There's a couple of them that I've seen that I thought, yeah, it's okay. but it's just not a genre of film that I get into. However, obviously they make billions of dollars,
Yeah.
If they didn't, it was like the third movie ever made, was the story of Dracula. So, it's obviously something that people have enjoyed since, early storytelling, the story and telling stories of monsters and all that kind of stuff. Is it essentially the same idea that, whether you're watching the war on TV and it's true, or you're watching a horror movie that, obviously is fake, but, how many times can Jason be killed, right?
The guy really perseveres. I thought it was a bit much in the 46th version.
Right?
But.
Yeah, exactly. Just how stupid can these dead teenagers be anyway? But watching all of that, we all know it exists. Even if you've never actually watched one, the movies exist. Is this all coming from the same place in our brains?
It is. It ignites the limbic system and provokes fear in us. But it's important to understand that this kind of fear is likened unto the fear that we have while riding Space Mountain or some other kind of roller coaster. Because even though it may evoke some kind of terror, there's pleasure in the realization that this is going to be over in 1 minute and 42 seconds. And then it's going to be safe. So it's really a combination of I'm going to do something like those. You take the leap off these bridges, right? And you're attached. What do they call those things?
Bungee jumping. You bet.
Bungee jumping. There you go. And it's absolutely terrifying, except you're going to survive. And so it's contained by the realization that this is just a few moments of pure terror. When people are living in a combat zone like that, I've worked with people who grew up in Nazi Germany, and they were children during that time, and there was no joy to it. There was no excitement to it. It was just pure terror. And there was nothing like, boy, did we enjoy the times when we heard the bombs coming and we hid in the basement of our places. There's none of that. The fact that, the genre, as you say, of horror movies is contained by the fact that this is not real and this is not dangerous. It's just going to provoke us to have the stress response, the fight or flight. The alarm reaction is going to begin several times during this movie, and we never know where. So we're sitting on eggshells. And here's the other thing. Nobody watches these. I shouldn't say nobody. There is someone who's doing it. But very few people watch these things alone. This is a social time for the teens. You're connecting with your peers. We're all doing this together. It's exciting because we're bonding. And there's a whole row of us, and we're showing how tough we are, and we're letting the girls grab our arms and squeeze our hands, and it's fun that way. We're showing how this doesn't scare me. I'm way tougher than stupid Jason. but it's, you go to these movies, and that's what you see. You see packs of teens, or at least dates, guys going together, girls going together. You don't see people going solo to a horror movie.
No, not usually. I never thought about that, but not usually. And you're right. Thinking back to my college days, which were just a couple of years ago.
Yeah, 3 years ago.
All right, yeah, no big deal. Not long ago, but the few times I did go to see a horror movie at the theater would be while I was in college. And yes, it was a group of us who went. Yeah.
Well, when was the last time you rode a roller coaster by yourself? It's just not something you would do.
No. And yet, I know there are those people who traveled the world riding roller coasters. That's their thing, and and they want to be scared by them and all. And I guess I've never quite understood that. I've never been, but maybe we all have our thing. So I'm saying no on the horror movies, no on the roller coaster. Yes, I have, and remember fondly, and would love to again if I could rappel 350 feet into a cave and then go caving underground, in an unmarked cave with friends of mine for the next couple of days. That would be awesome.
With friends, yes.
Yeah, well,
it's definitely a social thing and a bonding thing.
It is, and those some of those trips that I took back when I was in college with my friends caving, other people would be like, not in a million years. I mean, you start off with a 350-foot rappel into blackness, and that's a long rappel.
That is,
and that's like going down a 35-foot building, but with nothing to hold on to, and then you go through a cave. And people look at that. No way, that's crazy. I thought it was awesome. But but I guess we all have a thing, right?
Yeah, but recognize when we're talking about war, if there are people who are fascinated by watching it, most of the time they have that sense of containment. Like it's titillating perhaps, but it's not dangerous to me right now. I'm watching from the safety of my living room. When the bombs are going off around you, there is no comfort in that. There's no pleasure in that. It's just terror, and it's helplessness, and one feels vulnerable and at the mercy of what's happening around them.
So a reporter today asked the president as he was leaving the room, Mr. President, should Americans be afraid of nuclear war? And he said, no. Now, what was the reason for them to ask the question and then put it on TV?
Yeah, same thing. It's provocative.
Yeah.
It's, And the president's response, no, is of course misleading in the sense that, as would they have the bumper sticker that says one nuclear bomb can ruin your whole afternoon? Yeah. If we get into that kind of thing, if it escalates to that point, there goes civilization as we know it. And I think what he wanted to say is that please don't be afraid of that, because it's not at all I do not intend to escalate this to anything like that. It's not going to go that way if I have any say. I think that was President Biden's point.
And that's the way I took it too. But, okay, so you got all this fear, you got all this stress. What's it doing to our bodies?
Well, it's aging us because it's inspiring the stress response to stay on. And I don't want people to be alarmed by that. They're not surprised by it anyway. But this increase in anxiety is also going to increase the average person's desire to self-medicate that anxiety, which can be done in any number of ways, including comfort eating, comfort drinking, smoking, dissociating in some way, maybe getting lost in their music, or some people dive into binge watching of Netflix or whatever their thing is, or some people just read incessantly and they get lost in books. It's in an effort to manage one's feelings. What I would always want people to do is to begin with what they do feel and honor what they do feel, talk about what they do feel, write about what they do feel, have a safe place to share if they are frightened or if they are frustrated, it's important to express how we feel appropriately. And again, I want people to control what's there. So part of what you control is how you think about these things. And we know who's healthy, and we know who's happy, and we know how happy people think, and we know how depressed people think, and we know how anxious people think. And so there's some things that I want to encourage people to take control of. And that is especially what we think. And how do happy people think? They think positively. They think gratefully. They think in terms of problem solving. They think in terms of detachment from things they can't fix, change, or control. They have an ability to hand over to God or to universe or whatever their conception is, things that are outside of their own hands. They let go of things that were once hurtful or that provoke anger or resentment. They don't keep negativity. They don't hold on to resentments and regrets. You can control your behavior. What should I encourage with that? Well, I can't control the world, and I can't make this a better world unless I just focus on what's in my power. And that is, I can hold the door open for an elderly couple an extra 5 seconds while they're making their way. And I didn't fix this problem in the Ukraine, but I made the world a little better by being kind to someone. And I can send positive text messages to people in my world. And I can march if I believe in a cause. And I can write letters to a person, to a congressman or a representative. I can join the military if I feel like I want to stand up for a cause. In other words, I can take appropriate action and do things that make a difference with what power I have, with what control I have. Back to healthy people. Healthy people don't isolate. They connect with others. They empower others. Connection with others is just vital when it comes to long-term health and well-being. Thinking wise, we steer away from catastrophic thinking, which again pushes buttons like, should we be afraid that the world is going to end with a nuclear disaster? You could if you want to, but the only thing that's going to do is ruin your Monday. And it's going to upset you and possibly the people around you, but it's not going to fix anything. It's not a problem-solving thought. I think what's better is to say, boy, that's scary to me, and I sure hope it doesn't happen, and then put my energy into positive things. This is a good time to rekindle your faith. Those of you who were born and raised in a particular faith, we have a lot of research that says people of faith have lower levels of anxiety and that they can hand these things over to God or a higher power as they understand and detach and say, thy will be done. You know, there's probably no better prayer than that. If you believe in a loving God, then, you know, I give this to you because, you know, as it says in the Psalms, your way is so much higher. Your ways are so much higher than my ways. I can't even understand your ways. You know, David wrote that about God, and I'm sure that's true because we don't understand the mind of God. We don't know what's going on behind the scenes, but people of faith tend to prosper from believing unless they don't believe in a benevolent God. If they believe in a punitive, an angry God, then there are no benefits psychologically to believing in a fire and brimstone, angry God who's bent on tormenting us forever. That we lose all the psychological benefits of believing in a loving God, in a caring God, one who's invested in our lives. So I'm going to recommend that we do things that are very positive with our energy. And I'm always going to preach exercise because every day there's new research that comes out. Now we found out recently that the very best treatment for generalized anxiety, for severe clinical anxiety, is rigorous exercise. The kind of exercise that forces you to relax when you're done because you couldn't get anxious if you tried. You spend all your energy on the exercise. And so the experts are going to say, move. Even if you're in your chair at work, you're looking at a computer, or you're driving in a truck, move your arms, move your head. When you come to a stop, get out, stretch, walk around, jump on the ground and do a few push-ups. It doesn't have to be an hour straight of strenuous exercise. You can do little spurts of exercise, all day long.
Sure. All right. Hey, we're going to take a quick break. And while we do, everybody should get up and stretch for a moment. Or, if you're driving, you can stretch there a little bit at the steering wheel. So I want to ask you about the exercise and something else that you mentioned briefly a few minutes ago. So stay with us. More questions for Dr. Chris when we come back here on TNCRadio.live.
I'm Dr. Christopher Cortman, and now for the Mental Health Minute. Let's talk about anxiety. Did you know that anxiety is now considered to be the common cold of all mental illness? Yeah, as a matter of fact, 18% of our population is deemed to have an anxiety disorder. And I think the other 82% are lying about it. But is anxiety a mental illness? Is it a disorder? I mean, isn't it normal to be anxious? How do you know when you have an anxiety disorder versus normal anxiety? Well, there are 3 ways we can measure that: frequency, intensity, and duration of your anxiety. In other words, how often are you anxious? How much of the day do you spend nervous, worried, edgy? And how intense is your anxiety? I mean, does it interfere with your life? Do you have panic attacks? Does it stop you from dealing with other people and situations? And then the duration. How long does it last when you are anxious? If you find that any of those 3 or all 3 of those things are significant, it might be time to get some professional help. But where does anxiety come from? Not from situations, not from other people or circumstances in your life. Anxiety comes from the perception of threat. In fact, investment plus perceived threat is the formula for anxiety. In other words, you have to care about something, and you have to perceive that that something is threatened in order to create anxiety. So if you are anxious, what do we do with that? Let me give you 4 things that will work right away if you're dealing with anxiety. First, daily exercise. The research says if you exercise daily, you will decrease your anxiety. Secondly, learn to breathe properly. Even in short-term anxiety-inducing situations, inhaling to the count of 3 and exhaling to the count of 5 will reduce your anxiety significantly. Thirdly, take that formula that I gave you and figure out, am I too invested in something that doesn't really mean that much? Can I see this in a less threatening manner? Because if I can think differently, it will also reduce my anxiety. And finally, and this begins with young people all the way to the end of life, face the things that you're afraid of. By facing the things that scare you and championing those things, you will reduce your anxiety and become a more confident person.
Don't miss Marcia Campbell, North America's trucking sweetheart, Thursdays at 6 p.m. on tncradio.live.
Welcome back, tncradio.live. I'm Tom Kelly, along with Dr. Christopher Cortman. Dr. Cortman's the author of multiple books, and we talked about some of those last week. I'm going to ask you about one of those in the next segment, Dr. Cortman. But before we get there, speaking of books, you mentioned something about, owning our emotions and being able to give voice to them, and something about journaling and all that kind of stuff. Now, this is something that I guess the first time I ever thought about journaling of anything was when John Boy Walton was writing his diary, and so I insisted that I get a diary for Christmas one year, and I think I wrote the first 3 nights, and not much since. But I've always heard that journaling is supposed to be a really positive thing. Is this something that, along with exercise, you endorse as a positive step for mental health?
Journaling is very powerful because it helps people to not only express their feelings, but it also helps them to get in touch with their feelings. And anytime you write a paper about yourself and what you're thinking, you learn so much more about yourself than you even knew was true before you sat down with the pen and the paper or your typewriter. Listen to me. With your computer, your thoughts and your feelings end up surprising you sometimes because you didn't even know where you were going when you sat down and began the self-expression. And we have research that says people who write do better in their therapy. It's a wonderfully cathartic way. The word catharsis is actually a Greek word that means cleansing. We have an ability to express and release our feelings sometimes just in paper. Letter writing. I advise people to write letters to people who hurt them many years ago, and the letters are not to be mailed or sent. They're to someone else, but they're for me. I write to somebody who, molested me as a kid, and I express, this is what happened at the time. This is how it felt to be me. This is how it's impacted me over the years. And this is what I'm doing now to let go and to move on and to dismiss you from my life so that you're no longer controlling me. Keep in mind that whenever you have resentment or hatred or contempt for someone, you are affording them free rent in your head. They control you. Anything you hate controls you. And so, again, with writing, with journaling, I can express these kinds of things in an effort to release. What people don't understand about therapy and healing is that healing is not the byproduct of time passing. Healing is about release. It's about letting go. That's what brings about healing. And humans can heal from anything if they're brave enough to remember, to feel, to express, and to release. And that's why, you talk about 75,000 plus hours of therapy. That's why I'll be in my chair tomorrow for 9 more hours, because the joy of the profession is to help people to heal. And so, to answer your question, those who write do well because it gives them a ticket to express and to release.
Okay. So express and release. Let's do each of those kind of in turn for a second. So there is benefit to, and we'll use the example you used, somebody who had something horrible happen to them when they were a child. Okay. They were abused in some way or another. Is saying that or journaling that, just, putting it out there, is that by itself helpful?
It actually is. Yeah. I mean, it's better if you can take what you write in your journal and share it with a therapist, but it's still very helpful to write in your own journal. Absolutely.
And what's the benefit of writing that down or saying that out loud? Or, some people say, don't pick at that scab, leave that alone,
Yeah. Well, it's the expression and release of the emotion that is curative.
I see.
The myth is time heals all wounds. Well, right. I can introduce you to people who are worse today than when they got home from Vietnam. I can introduce you to people who are worse today than when they were molested or raped or whatever happened to them. But I can also introduce you to people who've done their work and they're better than ever. And what they did, I talk about 5 steps, Tom. The first one is remember, which means we got to go back to what happened. And we have to tell the tale in detail. I have been known to sit with someone who did not want to tell me a particular word when they were describing a rape scene or being molested or something, and I just sat there and said, "No, what are you saying? What happened next?" And they go, "Well, he put what? No, what?" And of course I know, but they have to say it out loud because it's the expression that makes it real. It makes it valid and allows them to feel their feelings, and expressing and releasing feelings is curative. Afterwards, they thank me for staying there with them and ensuring that they dig out the entire thing in its entirety, the entire trauma in its entirety, because feel, express, release. We have to be able to work through it and let it go. And then the 5th step is reframing. We can put a new frame on it and say, that was the worst thing that happened to me, but because that happened, it led to some healing, and because of that healing, now I'm stronger and I have the ability to help others. And many people I've worked with were thrilled to be in a position to help others because they have worked through things to that point where now they can help people who are going through what they did.
So there is, well, I'm sorry, trying to digest that for a second.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah.
Remember, feel, express, release, reframe. Those are 5 steps that I came up with when people want to heal from trauma. And sometimes they can do that in one session with a trauma. And other times it takes a long time before they're willing, and they slowly take me into what it was that happened. There's a condition, a well-documented condition called post-traumatic stress disorder. And there are many symptoms of post-traumatic stress that are basically about the conflict in the mind. One part of the mind is trying to get rid of this trauma and trying to push it out as much as possible. So that's why we have flashbacks and nightmares and intrusive recollections of the trauma. And then there's another part of the mind that's trying to bury it and get rid of it so we can repress it, we can deny it, we can avoid it. A big part of dealing with trauma for people is finding ways to not have to talk about it or not have to deal with it. I remember walking into a hospital room on a consult and asking a gentleman if he was, ever in combat. Did he serve? And he said, "Yep, I was in Vietnam, and we don't talk about it."
Yeah,
that was all one sentence. And that's sad because that went back to, 68, 69, 70, whenever he was there. And when I met him, it was like, 2015 or something. That's a long time to not be talking about something probably traumas involved that he's still holding on to.
Sure. Wow, that's well. That sets us up well for the final segment. So I want to ask you some more stuff, and we'll follow up here in just a few minutes. You're listening to TNCRadio.live. We'll be right back. Stay tuned.
This info blog on TNCRadio.live is brought to you by the Truckers Network at app.thetruckersnetwork.net. 3 simple tips to improve your CSA score. There are millions of drivers on the road every day. That's why trucking companies must stay compliant with federal safety regulations. Staying compliant with federal safety regulations not only helps keep yourself and others on the road safe, but also helps improve your safety scores. A good CSA score is extremely important to the success of a trucking company. Drivers that have a good score have access to preferred loads and reduced insurance rates. Here's some tips on how to improve your CSA score. What is the CSA program? CSA, Compliance, Safety, Accountability, is a program of the FMCSA that holds truck drivers accountable for their role in safety. The main goal of the CSA program is to prevent accidents from happening on the road and to identify high-risk commercial motor carriers. Although the FMCSA runs the CSA program, they don't issue CSA scores. The FMCSA created an online safety measurement system that records data like roadside inspections and crash reports from the last 2 years. The data is updated monthly and assigned to your DOT number. The FMCSA then organizes the SMS data into 7 categories, often referred to as basics: behavior, analysis, and safety improvement. How to improve your CSA score? When it comes to CSA scores, the lower the scores, the better. Your CSA score determines whether or not you'll get a visit from the DOT. Over time, your CSA score can be improved by making safety a core focus of your trucking company. Prioritize pre-trip inspections. A large percentage of CSA violations are truck-related. This could all be prevented with a pre-trip inspection. Pre-trip inspections are one of the most important things you need to do before any trip. A simple pre-trip inspection helps you get in tune with your truck before you drive. It lets you know if anything's wrong with the truck or needs to be fixed before hitting the road. Not only are you required by law to perform a pre-trip inspection, but it also keeps you and others safe while on the road. Check out our blog, 4 Reasons Why Pre-Trip Inspections Are Important for Truck Drivers. Be more cautious of who you hire. Hiring drivers with a good driving record is crucial if you want to have a good CSA score. Remember that CSA scores use your driver's crash records to calculate your score. So if you hire a driver with a bad driving history, you're taking on more of a risk. Challenge citations. You have at least 2 years to challenge a violation. If you challenge a violation and it gets dismissed, it'll be removed from your company's CSA score. The Truckers Network has teamed up with CDL Consultants and CDL 360 to provide a full spectrum of safety, compliance, and audit services to our members. CDL Consultants has successfully reduced or dismissed over 35,000 violations and tickets. They've worked with tens of thousands of drivers and companies, including many top 100 carriers. If you need to fight a violation, search for a CDL Consultant on the Truckers Network webpage at app.thetruckersnetwork.net. Join Tom Kelly and the rest of the team each day on the morning grind. Then stay tuned for an encore presentation of last night's Landline Now. Weekdays on TNCRadio.live.
Welcome back to Building Strong Minds with Dr. Christopher Cortman. I'm Tom Kelly. Dr. Chris, the hour goes by so fast every Monday night. I can't believe that we're already coming down to the last few minutes here. So we don't set this up. We really don't. I'm sure people are like, yeah, sure you don't. But we didn't get a chance to chat this week. One of the things we didn't talk about last week was this book, Keep Pain in the Past. And and in the interest of full disclosure, I have not read that book, but I've read.
I haven't either.
I didn't think you had, but it seems like to me a lot of the stuff you were just talking about must relate back to the book based on what I read about the book. So, am I right?
Writing this book was something that was so important for me to do because there are so many stories in the book of people who had terrible, horrible traumas. The book opens with a man whose two sons broke through the ice in his backyard when they were playing hockey and drowned. And those were, his two main reasons for living and how it played out in his life and what it required for healing. And there's a caution to reading a book like this that is important to go out, which is whatever you're going through in your life, here are stories that are horrible stories. And the reason to tell these stories is to provide hope for the rest of us, because if these people can heal, if these people have a life, then there's hope for the rest of us. And so, I explained those 5 steps earlier, and that's described in the book. Yesterday, I was cleaning out some old boxes, doing some moving, and I found a picture that was given to me by a patient. And the story that goes with the picture is the following, Tom, if I can tell it. A gentleman is 50 years ago. Well, I should back up and say he came to me because of the stories about the Penn State disaster with boys being molested, probably about 8 to 10 years ago now. And he said that was bothering him so much, and it was increasing his drinking. This was a professional man with a doctorate, and he didn't like how he felt or how this was upsetting to him. And he said, there's a story I've never told anybody that has resurfaced because of this crisis. And the long and short of it was that he was in middle school 50 years ago, and they had a traveling magician. And the magician asked, I need a volunteer. And every 7th and 8th grade boy and girl raised their hand. And he chose my patient to come up on stage. And I don't know what he did, sawed him in half or whatever magicians do, and kind of put him back together at the end of the trick and whispered to him, if you want to know how I did it, come backstage after the show. Well, again, a long story short, the magician made sure that everybody pretty well had left and raped my patient anally right there backstage in his own middle school auditorium. And then before he left, got in his face and said, if you ever tell anybody, I will kill your entire family, including your dog right in front of you.
Wow.
My poor patient said, I didn't know how he knew I had a dog. And so he went home and, the horror began. And 50 years later, he's in to tell me this. And I had him do an imagery the week afterwards where he had a chance to watch it one more time and then to go onto the scene and to help that little boy put that away forever. And so to make a long story short, the next week he came in and I said, how are you doing? And he said, I'm doing better. He said the first 45 minutes of last week's session were the second worst of my life, followed by the 15 minutes that were the best when he was ministering to his little self. Anyway, he gave me this picture 2 weeks later that was a copy of an old Michelangelo one. that talked about the rebellious servant where he was breaking away from bondage. He said, "This is what you did for me." And 2 weeks later, he quit drinking, and he's been sober ever since. So it's a beautiful story of healing that came from having to face the trauma of what happened 50 years earlier.
And so our suggestion then is you can face the trauma, you can get the help. We're going to be back with you again, same time next week. You're listening to Building Strong Minds on tncradio.live, radio.live, 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 radio.live.